Hi, everybody. Welcome to this month's community stream for July 30th, 2024. I'm going to run straight through some project updates, and then at the end, we're going to have a fireside chat with Yash Watts. And that's going to be a discussion over WASI 021. So, on to project updates. I wanted to give a little bit of update on actually this blog post that Yash wrote, where he was communicating where the WASI targets are going to be. WASM 32 WASI P1 is basically the replacement for what was previously WASM 32 hyphen WASI. And now, so you'll see WASM 32 WASI P1. If you have a fairly recent Rust install, you should already potentially be getting deprecated warnings if you're just calling WASM 32 WASI. So last community update, I gave a heads up that, hey, this is changing. Go read this blog post. It's really great. One additional update now that I have this month is that Alex Crichton, I believe, has landed this in upstream. And so WASM 32 WASI P2 will be a tier 2 target in September. And what that means for Bytecode Alliance projects is that there will effectively be pre-built binaries now. And that's something that we can depend on inside tools like Cargo Component, which is one of our Bytecode Alliance projects, for having a really nice native integration for building components with Rust. And so we can get rid of some of our shims that we have there today once this lands. So that's really great. Just wanted to give an update there. That's happening in upstream. WASM Time 23 released last week. I've seen, this is a very small selection of that I made based on the release notes, and I added a link to the release notes. So if you want to see more detail, please go check there. But these are some of the top of the line additions that I saw that I thought were worth calling out. I've been seeing a lot of evolution for dwarf style debugging and for components. That was done by Alex. There's also now a crate named WASI Preview 1 Component Adapter Provider that gives you all the WASI P1 adapters as constants and Rust code. I think that's probably going to be really handy for a lot of folks that are doing Rust embeddings and are, perhaps doing things like when handed a module, adapting that to a component. Now, the last one that I called out here is a proposal that Nick Fitzgerald has been pushing through inside the WebAssembly community group. He is finding ways to support custom page sizes, and so he landed that now inside WASM Time, which is a reference implementation of this. And then I believe he's got it on the docket for the next WASM CG to vote to advance this proposal into phase 2, which is really exciting. I also want to go ahead and welcome Yash. Hey, Yash. I'm running through project updates, but I thought it might be fun to do some of these with you. I just did the Rust target one, and I actually just said what you told me. So for the excerpt there, I'm going to go back. I just kind of said, please check out your blog post. That a little update about it being tier 2 in September. Expect if you're using WASM 32 WASI to start seeing deprecation warnings. That's kind of the main update there. Is there anything else that I should say on that topic?
Yeah, so the September date is a funny one where I I did my best, what do you call it, like counting backwards of
Prediction.
Okay, yeah, where I believe it should be well, we've got a nice little table here where it's Rust 181, I think is the one that this will land in. It might be Rust 182 because the patch landed like right around the cutoff date for like when betas and nightlies are like sort of moved over to the next version. So I think it's 181. And, in case I'm wrong, I'm very sorry, everyone.
Communicate early, communicate often.
Yes.
And do our best.
Exactly.
That's the best we can do.
Yeah. My hope is that if that's the case, or not if that's the case, when that's the case, we should also start seeing Cargo Component. I don't know if you mentioned this. I joined late, so sorry if I'm repeating anything.
But I think it's helpful to repeat it. I went through it pretty fast.
I'm so excited for like Cargo Component to like remove the shims So you can
Yes.
actually look at it and be like, hey, what are the actual interfaces being used? And we can get rid of, I think it's like 70 kilobytes of shim, which will be nice.
Oh yeah. I saw that. I also saw inside WASM Time. I actually didn't call it out in the
Uh,
WASM Time update, but I saw that the adapters from Bjorn has been reduced in size fairly dramatically. So
yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of evolution there. Yeah. What I tend to do in the community update is just
Uh,
find like three-ish of my favorite things that I want to call out
ah,
and then be like, okay, go look at these other things. So these are the three that I picked. But since I have you with me today, is there anything else that you would highlight for the WASM Time project going forward? You've been making changes inside WASM Tools. I actually highlighted
yes.
something from you there. So maybe we can hold it for then too.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't really work on Wasm Time much. I'm mostly a fan slash user of Wasm Time.
Same.
Yeah. I was over there, like, like whenever like a post comes out from like Chris Fallon where it's like, hey, how we like use more formal methods to make it even more secure and correct. I'm like, holy, I love this.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I can share some about Wasm tools if that's interesting.
Yeah, let's jump to it right now, and then I'll go back and
Sure.
give an update on Whammer.
Oh, these are the ones you've got.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now I saw you did some enhancements for include, so I'm sorry I didn't include that in my little favorite bullets. But when you look at WASM tools, that's one of our projects that has the most collaboration across the Bytecode Alliance. I think that's one of the most exciting things about it is that you see changes from first-time contributors. That's like one of the
Mhm.
early places that a lot of people jump in. We got a playground added. I highlighted that, I believe, last community stream, but I thought that was pretty cool. A web playground. It's a pretty awesome thing
Oh,
to
what?
add. Yeah, yeah. People didn't know about it,
That's
and
awesome.
I actually think it's really awesome. So, anyways, Wasm Tools easily one of the best projects to check out if you're looking for something to what your first time contribution might be. It helps that it's like a giant mono repo of lots of other cool sub projects. So it's sort of like a meta project. And that's probably why there's so much happening there. For the things that I picked here, I'm telling kind of a through line story. So
Uh-huh.
with WASM tools, there's some changes that are happening that I know you're aware of
Yeah.
for being able to do SymVer parsing, adding feature gates basically
Mhm.
to WIT. So Alex added the @since and @unstable annotations. He also actually in the past week added @deprecated. We should probably explain what's available in 021 versus future plans. So I'm going to do the last two, and then I'm going to pass it to you. So WASM Tools component WIT all features was added by Randy. So basically, that enables all of these other WIT features. And so if you want to see the WIT and its pure form, and you flip on the all features flag, the WIT definition that'll come out will include like all the pieces from @unstable. That so you don't have to know what all the feature gates are ahead of time to get all of those.
Love that.
Yeah, that was a great idea. And then I wish we had thought of it originally, but I'm glad Randy came in and added it. And then this last one is more enablement that Nick added for custom page size proposal support that he then used inside WASM Time. All right, so let's talk about what these annotation gates are. I just said they happened, but I didn't say how to use them or anything or why we did all that work.
Well, the obvious answer is there was no reason. We just did it for fun. The end.
Always, we love
Yeah.
doing work. We love it.
Yeah, yeah. No. So like I mean there's the actual like story we can tell about evolution, and then there's the like my own personal story I can tell about like this is one of my pet peeves about like evolving anything is I want to know when things are evolved. The Rust compiler or the Rust standard library has these very useful like, hey, this API was introduced in this version. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like when I first started like using Rust, I was like, I'd like to use that for my libraries, and they won't let me. Um, so I'm jealously looking at Swift, and like Swift has it, but we then started talking about because WASI is a spec, it's evolved as a spec, and we're trying to version it, we're trying to evolve it, and so we started looking at it and was like, okay, so we want to introduce new APIs, and they will change over time, and like how do we sort of maintain all these things and make sure that they're the right version, that we like know when things were introduced, but also that we can make changes over time without breaking things. And like, looking at like what the Rust compiler did and like seeing things in our languages, it seemed useful if we could like add that metadata to our definitions. And that's how like @since came into play. Then we realized like, oh, we should have a way to like stage our features. Like as extensions are like being developed, we can land them, we can implement them, test them out, and be like, oh, actually, there's a little mistake here. Or like we have implementer feedback and we evolve them. We're not beholden to, like floating patches or open PRs for like a year. It's just part of the thing. And at some point we say like, okay, it's implemented, it's good. We're going to cut a release and now switch it over from @unstable to @since and make it part of an actual WASI release. So yeah, I mean, all of this, you were there on the front seat, but like, yeah, explaining to our audience, our lovely audience, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's something pretty cool that might be happening this week, and that is us having a release party together,
Yes.
where we're gonna cut WASI 021. I think that's probably news to just about anybody that's watching, actually.
Yeah.
So, what is WASI 021?
Yeah. So WASI 021 will be our okay. So WASI 01 was released in hey, we're big screen now. That's nice. WASI 01 was originally called WASI, what was it? Snapshot 1? Yeah, Snapshot 1. But the idea was like, oh, we're working on this WASI thing. Oh, people want to use it. Sure. Here's a snapshot. And
Yeah.
then we didn't release
WASI
it.
preview snapshot, I think, is actually the
Oh my
order.
God. People were very like, this is just a very early thing. And then, we didn't release a new version for another 5 years. So people were like, eh. And then in February, we released WASI 02. And immediately the thought was like, how do we make sure we don't have years between releases, but we get to like a more regular cadence, a way that we get to like improve things, even if it's just documentation or wording changes or small API additions. How do we make this a more regular thing so we like de-risk it and allow people to like become involved? And so, we've been working on a release process, and that will start with WASI 021 coming out August 1st. And then every 2 months after that, we'll be having a new release. Originally, I was like, what about every 6 weeks? And then, a bunch of folks were like, we're not doing odd weeks. We're doing like fixed dates of, and so every first Thursday, I believe, of every 2 months. So 4 monthly. Is that English?
It's good enough for me.
Okay. I'm glad. We'll be doing a new one. So the first Thursday of 8 plus 2 is October, and then December would be 023. And we're working on features and trying to make sure that we get to ship things. The first version will be we're essentially shipping the release process. That is the thing we're like shipping. So it required infrastructure changes, that required process changes. It was a lot of work. But the actual thing in people's hands will be like, hey, our APIs are versioned now. They've been updated. All of the clarifying comments from the last 6 months will be part of it. So it's not a big change, but from there on, we get to extend it and really add the changes we want to do.
And that essentially required these WIT features to enable feature gating. So we have @since. So since this version, this feature is available.
Yep.
We have @unstable, which the idea behind that is as we're evolving a feature, and maybe it's not ready yet, it's behind an unstable flag. That's really helpful because that means that we can create and evolve things without shipping them, but getting it in people's hands and beginning to create reference implementations. Really great. And a lot of this I credit to you, Yash, because you were like, okay, let's do this crazy thing, which is let's evolve a spec continuously. Let's do iterative development. Let's effectively set up release trains. And there's a lot of really good and compelling reasons to do this, and it's going to allow us to actually make more stable software. And that's something we all want. So,
yes.
So when will people be able to use WASI 021? What has to happen for that for like your average user?
Yeah, I mean, because we're shipping the process more so than any concrete feature, you're already using WASI 021 essentially. But no, the actually getting it into people's hands, where their tool chains and everything's like targeting it, that will. So we got a little bit of a chicken and egg problem here, where we don't want to ship anything that's untested and unvalidated. So we have working implementations of all these things. We know we can ship it, but then we require an actual release of these things afterwards. So first we like develop the features and we make sure all implementers are on board. Then we cut a release of the actual specification, which will be this Thursday. And then implementers will be able to like reference that specification because now it's cut. This is the everything's included. And in the next release of whatever their tools are, whatever their things are, they'll be able to use this and target this. So that means WASM time releases once a month. They just had a release. So that means, in about a month's time, there will be a version of WASM time likely, or likely, certainly, like targeting 021. Same goes for Jaco. Same goes for like language tool chains. So first comes the release, and then on the cadence, on the schedule of the implementers, they'll be able to update it.
I'll drop a link in the chat for Jaco adding support for this, and I see the test suites passing and everything. That's really great. We've had it in WASM time for, I want to say, about a month now. So I believe it landed in WASM time 22. But if it didn't technically land there, it definitely is in the one that happened last week. So I think a lot of that is exciting. Now, when I say what do they need, right? You basically said, hey, your runtime of choice. If you use Jaco, you might be running with Node.js. Your runtime of choice has to have support for it, or your SDK that evolves with it. And what do you get? Well, you get a bunch of new documentation, actually, because that's what we've been adding inside the WIT document itself. Supports doc style comments, and so we've been adding lots of clarification inside those. So I think that's a nice thing that everybody will appreciate. And I think the other kind of cool thing to highlight is once your runtime has this and you're creating your own interfaces, which I'm seeing a lot more of here lately, then they too could start doing this type of work for their own interfaces that they're evolving. Because the idea is WASI's that foundational base. And we've got all of the shared types and interfaces that we can build on top of. We have shared worlds that we know these runtimes will support. But then there's this other set of things where people are building their own APIs for their components. And so this is a feature that I think people will be enabled to start using inside 021.
So I took a really big sip. I was like about to like burst out in agreement. And I was like, oh no.
All right, it's my turn.
Yeah. So what's your no. But yeah, have you? So okay, sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. How far on tangents can we go? Because like when you and I like talk, I feel like we just stack.
We go places.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we reserve up to the hour. I do sometimes like if I'm like dropping content, I try to like get all the content in the first 30 minutes. And then I go where the conversation takes us. I've always found that when I'm chatting with people like Luke and Alex and Pat, like the chat is the most important part, but it's impossible to plan. So let's go wherever you want to go.
Because I was like, maybe they're like more important announcements, but I can feel like the tangent building up and I'm like trying to fight it, or it's like
would it make you feel better if I ran through the PowerPoint and then we got back to this?
Sure, let's
all right, let's do it. Okay. So I think sometimes once you get to the thanks part, people are like, okay, I'm free. I can breathe a sigh of relief. So the only other project update that I was going to give is inside Whammer. They've been iterating quite a bit on WASI-NN and then syncing the spec updates with that. So that was a major change that landed. They've been adding lots of different new APIs. Basically, the next 3 are about adds of APIs. But if you're looking for like the package and version and type information, that's a the major feature set that they've added in terms of API. Being able to enlarge memory, that's important to embedders, and then also table type API support. Again, there was over a page worth of changes, and here's my little smattering of my favorites. So please check out the release notes if you're interested in more.
That's lovely.
I heard you breathe. Yes, yeah, it's great. I think WAMR, their basis on WAMR 2.0 was significant. I believe that was April. I want to say when their release was, and that included like garbage collection and MEM64 support. So it's a pretty significant updates there. So I don't know where the ecosystem is in terms of having adopted the latest. Once 2.0 is a significant breaking change, I would love to poll some of our users and see where people are at. I'm like a data geek, and it's kind of hard for me because right now my data comes from like conversations and like complaints effectively inside GitHub issues. And so anyways, I keep if you're a WAMR user, definitely pull out 211. All right.
What we should definitely not do is add telemetry to everyone's runtime. You want to have like one. Oh my God.
Like I realize that freaks people out, but I also just I would love the data.
Yeah. It's so divisive, where it's like on the one hand you want it, but on the other hand you're like, like people, fully.
I do have something cool to announce that didn't make it into my slides because I just got a ping from Pat Hickey, who is behind organizing our next Plumber Summit. So let's just say it live now. It's news to everybody because I just found out because he just decided it. September 26th and 27th of this year in Redmond, Washington State, we're going to host our third Plumber Summit. We called this version last time Bacon, the Bytecode Alliance conference, and we called it Bacon because it was co-located with WASMCon. But as you might be aware, WASMCon, actually, I do have a slide for this one. WASMCon was moved, now co-located with KubeCon and Cloud Native Con. That is in Salt Lake City, Utah, the 11th and 12th of November. But there's so much happening inside the WASI space and a lot of the work that we're doing in the Bytecode Alliance that we really wanted to meet sooner rather than later. And so the next major general purpose WebAssembly conference, WASMCon, the CFPs for that are now closed. I know that reviewers just hit a major deadline because I just finished doing a bunch of reviews. So I expect that schedule to be announced fairly soon. And yeah, so please join us there. But going back, Bytecode Alliance Plumber Summit, if you're collaborating with us in the Bytecode Alliance or you want to, please join us in Redmond, Washington, September 26th and 27th. And folks will be there planning out things like native async, WASI 03. How do we add a bunch of new different types of WASI interfaces? There's a lot for us to dig in and discuss. And that, Yash, is all of my slides.
Amazing. Do you know if this year there'll be because last year I joined in virtually because I couldn't make it. Will that be possible this year too for folks who like can't travel?
Oh yes, definitely. I think we are significantly global. What do you call that? Hyper distributed. And yes, I don't know everybody on my team that's going to be able to be there. We were just talking about that this morning. It's like, okay, well, I'm, on my team, folks are coming from Victor, whose change actually I linked earlier for the JCO change, and then Roman in Switzerland, who, it's a lot of travel, and for them, probably easiest if we provide recordings like we did last time, and live video and audio. Now, we could do even better. DIY by me is not always the best audio video experience. And
Yes.
so I'm very hopeful that we can get a little bit even more professional setup. I know that we had like some crosstalk last time in the same room. Now, the Redmond office, which is the Microsoft office, since Microsoft is game to host us, which we really appreciate. There were multiple breakout rooms, and so it was like a really great venue for us to be able to do this. And we were able to have mics in each room and set up separate streams. And so I don't believe that specifically will be an issue there.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great.
I'm super excited. Yeah. And so if you have ideas of topics you want to go through, any type of feedback that you have for us, please talk to us on Zulip or reach out directly. I think it's a community event, a community-led effort. So please get involved.
Yeah, definitely. So when you were like, are there any topics you'd like to talk about? I'm like, what would we talk about? And I'm like, it's like either 100 ideas or like I'm like
Yes.
0. Where I'm like, yeah.
One of my favorite things that we've done together is I started asking people what their crazy ideas to build with WebAssembly components and what we've done. And just having people like Luke and Alex in the same room, just being like, okay, well, what nonsense could I make with this? And there's just so much, because you're talking about general purpose compute that's portable everywhere and composable. The types of applications and things that people come up with are really exciting. I like thinking about it from that direction, because then it's like, okay, well, what do we have to build to enable that type of thing?
Yeah.
And we're pretty close. That's the other fun part. That's why it's so fun.
Do you have like if you had the time, like a little moonshot project where you're like, oh, I'd love to build that?
I have so many. It's like, do I talk about the moonshot project that I'm actually working on, which is, work. But no, I think that one of the most important things to me is breaking down language silos, because I felt that at big mega corp and not being able to collaborate with people at the same company, because we draw these weird lines and we're like, well, you have to use our SDK to deliver in this space. And it's like, okay, well, why is it so hard for me to consume your SDK and actually contribute? And so I guess that's my big moonshot is, would it be possible for us to actually break down those silos and be able to have the best component, like the best component to rule them all, the one that's the fastest, most performance, got the best API, all those types of things. Like, that's the ecosystem that I want to see. And so, yeah, I guess my moonshot would be like a leaderboard for that. I want to see a leaderboard for the best regular expression component.
Oh, that's really fun. That is really fun. Yeah. I feel like that. So I for people who like don't know me, it's like I also work on the Rust programming language, have for like quite a while. And like occasionally people talk about like, oh, like we'd love to build a new programming language with like these capabilities or something. And then every single time someone says that, there's like two problems. There's one, like, how do I implement the compiler to like generate code or like target the thing? And like LLVM by and large is a pretty good answer for that. Now CraneLift is also becoming a really good answer for that too. But the second one is always ecosystem. Any language you want to build, any language you want to like kickstart from zero, it's like you're gonna need HTTP server support, HTTP client support, interacting with command line stuff. There's just like a list of basics, and every language has to like either re-implement it or like bind to C, and it always ends up being like, oh, what's our API? Like it would be so cool if like these could just be standard things where it's like, oh, here's an interface.
Yes, and I think what that will probably mean, jumping from what you're saying there, is that we could get really weird with it, with our languages that we build. Like, if you just get bootstrapped with a whole ecosystem, your choices could be so strange, but so awesome. I can't imagine. I'm not, I love reading about new languages. I like checking out things that are WASM native, like Moonbit and Grain. But at the end of the day, I look at that problem today and I'm like, oh, that's insurmountable. Like, I want to find fresh college grad, and throw a problem at them and then be really successful. And that's hard to do with some of these newer languages, just because there's a lack of materials to learn from. But if we had something that was like, okay, look, hey, you got great debuggability, you got great testing, you got this whole library of ecosystems, you don't have to reinvent any of the wheels. That's exciting. It's really exciting. So yes, that I want to have a moonshot chance and community stuff. That to me is the most fun thing that we can do. But that's obviously not all that we're going to talk about. We'll be talking about work stuff that we got to get done too.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Do you have any like? I've never asked you this, but do you have any like wacky programming language ideas or like wacky WebAssembly ideas? If you don't, yeah.
Man, well, I think it was Zlang that had a really nice experience in terms of like, you have this problem of how do you get rid of Dinebox inside Rust? And I'm like terrified having this conversation with you, by the way.
No.
Like, again, not a language expert, but I've seen a lot of different ways that people try to solve this. With garbage collectors, they've run into the issue where you kind of, once you're like at memory, you get this like really terrible thrashing behavior, and it totally degrades performance. And so if you're trying to create, and when I was doing this investigation, I was trying to find the right optimal language, specifically that compiles into WASM, that I can embed in a database and run in the same process as like the query process engine. So if you're familiar with databases, a lot of them are running at like the limit, like that's the goal. Like give me all the available resources and I will figure it out, and I will create my own resource allocation pools and everything. So most things are pre-alloced. How do I make sure that I never do a mem copy? How do I make sure that I never do any garbage collection? I'm not like spending a lot of cycles bumping reference counts, for example, because I just know the right things. So I don't have an answer to how to find and solve this problem, but right now we are very careful inside the component model where we don't expose those types of internals, right? But what if I was creating a component that had shared memory inside my component, so inside my guest space, with multiple WASM modules for all the different pieces that I was building with, very similar to what we do with like componentized Pi. And Python is actually a pretty cool one to highlight here, because a lot of people are doing data sciencey things, and that's what a lot of people want to use. I actually tried to do this with it's not NumPy, it's Nim. I think it's Nim, that language, which seemed to have a lot of alignment with, if you're a Python person, you might really like this one, this language. Anyways, I couldn't solve it, but it definitely felt like there is a space for a data science application that has all the flexibility of Python with structured annotations and a clear memory management methodology that you could allow an external engine to manage. Not maybe WASM's GC, I don't know, but something like that would be just huge and incredible. That's probably a lot more information than you wanted, but I just high perf languages for extremely specialized use cases is the thing that I'm really interested in, especially because WebAssembly is basically the last plugin model you ever need. If you have an extensibility or an embedded use case, consider it. And once we start getting weird with languages, I think that is a space that's going to get cool really quickly.
Definitely. Have you ever like tried, maybe your answer is kind of, but like, have you actually like tried embedding a WebAssembly runtime inside of a database?
Oh yeah. So single store, yes, I can. It's public. Single store embedded WASM time inside its database, and is in the adopters MD for WASM time. Now there were some significant changes that my teammate Pete Viteri made, specifically around the memory management side of things. And Rust isn't unwind safe, which is spooky and hard when you're a database and you can never go down, right? So embedding WASM time there is an interesting challenge that you have to solve. It's solvable.
Wait. But unwind safe. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so let's say in a scenario where you're passing you're passing a struct from your host side into the guest, and
Uh-huh.
that's because you're triggering some API. Let's say I compiled a machine learning model
Mhm.
and inference, so I've got like the decision tree, let's say something simple, or a neural network, something like
Yeah.
that, compiled into my WASM logic, and maybe inside my data segment, I got stored the model to walk through. So what gets passed in is, let's say, the iris indices of, I'm trying to identify what type of iris this is. So like this is the super basic ML example. So I'm passing in just a series of numbers for talking about like the stem size and the petal size and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And I want to run an inference. What I'm passing in is a struct. So I'm using the component model interface type for a record, most likely. Passing that in, and what happens is that there's basically a part where a host owns it, and
Mhm.
then the component needs to take ownership of
Mhm.
it, and then it execute. And so, what if, and again, I'm running at max memory.
Mhm.
What if I'm not able to do that? Where
Right.
there's a step there,
Mhm.
and then I get an exception, and then I get a panic, and now I can't unwind, or I have to unwind, but I want to be like, try this. No, okay, never mind. I take it back. I'm going to try again with something else, or I'm going to pass that, since this was a distributed workload. Like we'll distribute it somewhere else.
Okay.
There's like a lot there. I think the fundamental problem is knowing what you can do before
Mhm.
you do it, and
Uh,
that was effectively how we solved it.
okay. 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 So if I had to like summarize this specific use case, it's you were dealing specifically with like what do you do in the case of an allocation error where it's like well, you can no longer allocate memory. And
Yeah.
you're saying, ideally, I would like to know ahead of time, but if I don't know ahead of time, please let me know as soon as possible. Don't just go crashing on me because
Yes.
I'd like to handle that. I'd like to do something with that, where it's offloading or something else. Um,
Plenty of options. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. 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 Because when you said it's not unwind safe, I was like, okay, that can mean one of several things. I don't. And it's like, okay, great, great, great. That makes sense. So the Linux folks, the Rust for Linux folks, they have very similar. Sorry,
Ooh.
I'm wearing my Rust hat today.
Yeah.
They have very similar concerns, questions, things they want from Rust. Because in the kernel, you don't want the kernel to be like, oh, there's no memory. Okay, I'm out. I'm unwinding. They want to be like, can I allocate? Oh no, then I'll do something with it. And that's true for the Linux kernel. They have a formal thing about it, but like using Rust in any kernel requires that. And so it makes sense to me that you're saying like, oh, well, in a database, this, and I'm like, oh yeah, because kernels and databases they're different things, but they're also not that different.
It's
Um,
systems level programming for sure.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, so
Yeah.
that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's one of, gosh, so many different cases that I can think of with WASM time and embedding it and whatnot.
Mhm.
So after we did that work, and this was a couple years ago now, I've seen Postgres look at using WASM
Oh,
for UDFs, TIKV, ScyllaDB,
what's a
just so
UDF?
many people. Oh, user defined function.
Okay,
Sorry,
yeah, great.
databasey speak.
Yep.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense. Squint a little bit, and all of a sudden it's a plugin model all over again.
Oh yeah,
And you see that
100%.
everywhere.
Wait, but so Postgres is like Postgres users or Postgres
This
the
is a
actual
Postgres
project?
extension.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
okay,
So I don't think it's in the main line, but it's something that
okay.
you can add. Now but I digress. There's so many now. A lot of the major databases. I love your cat. And also data streaming projects are use WebAssembly to extend it, like Red Panda. So
Oh, I
yeah,
didn't know that.
I
That's
love
awesome.
them too. Yes. Yeah. It was fun talking to the developer around it because, they were basically saying, hey, I just, I got to go SDK.
Hmm.
I don't know anything about JavaScript. And all of a sudden I got to write a JavaScript SDK to use all this stuff. And so when people are excited about the component model, they're like, oh, wait, I heard Luke Wagner say I could get SDKs for free. And that's pretty interesting as a developer that's got to maintain lots of different clients and SDKs. Yeah. So kind of going, back around. That's why I think we think a lot of that stuff's exciting.
Yes.
So okay, what happens after we haven't at all talked about on this stream ever about the roadmap with WASI and how that intersects with the things that we do within the Bytecode Alliance.
Sorry. Okay, hold on. That was a great question. I was extremely distracted because my screen's here, my camera's here, and between here and there's a window, and I suddenly see a little animal walking outside, and I'm like, "That's a funny animal. That's a cat." And then like my partner behind the cat, and I was like, "Oh, they've gone for walkies."
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, I was very confused what it was, but I just, it's special cat. Anyway,
same thing happens to me. I actually have my blinds closed. It's typically birds that I get distracted by when I'm in here, so I have to like shut something down. But yes. So basically, we just said 021 on Thursday. We're having a release party.
Yeah.
Expect that to show up inside your runtimes like Jco and Wasm Time. They are going to pull in WASI 021, and what that basically means is if you're using that, you can start using AdSense and AdUnstable. But we didn't talk about ad deprecated and when that would land.
Right. So it has landed already in the component model. We are not adding it to any of the existing WASI specifications today because we were like, well, adding it is maybe the wrong way to phrase it. We're not using it in any of the specs today because I was like, well, let's make 021 as uneventful as possible. Because we're coming up on that like right now, but 022 will probably want to use it for some things. Actually, I happen to have found a discrepancy between the WASI HTTP specification and RFC 9110. I think is the IETF RFC, HTTP RFC, whatever the semantics one is. I think is 9110. But that one talks about like, hey, we have headers and like the fields, and this is what we call a field key, and this is what we call a field name, and we like named it something else, or field value. And it was like, hey, actually, these two things should have a different name. So what we're likely going to do in 022 is we're going to rename a thing, and that means say this thing here is deprecated, please use this other thing and make it point to the same type, basically. So it still works because one's an alias for another, but you should use the new one. And then at some point, like our plan is to release WASI 03, hopefully some point next year. And what we'll then do, there's a number of these things like related to time, like experts have shown up and they were like, hey, maybe you should change some stuff. What we'll do is like, as we're like doing these point releases, we'll make some changes. We'll find bugs, little discrepancies, little polish things. We'll update them all. And when we do a big, like, breaking change, a breaking release, it's not that breaking, but like it's technically breaking. We'll make sure there's compat stuff. But once we do that, we have an opportunity because it's still like, we're not WASI 1.0 quite yet, but we are like aiming for. I'll stop with the prefaces, but we get to essentially like remove them from that new release and be like, okay, all of these deprecated things, you'll only have the new things. So we're still treating this as a we're not just going to break your things. That is the important thing. That is why deprecated exists. Existing code doesn't break, but we do keep the evolution going. And at these like big predefined like breakpoints, like WASI 03, that gives us an opportunity to like do the full like sweep to the actually recommended thing.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm hearing is ad deprecated is not going to technically be in any of the specs that you pull in from WASI 021.
Correct.
That makes sense. And you're not breaking me. Cool. I love that. So no breaking changes in the 02 timeframe. Great. But we do expect to make some at deprecations. You called out one case that we know of inside HTTP to fix some issues there, and potentially inside WASI clocks for time.
Yes.
And because we got feedback from experts, which is also great.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, are there other types of things that are going to get added under the WASI O2 umbrella that you expect over the next, I don't know, 6 months?
Yeah. So there's a clear distinction between additions to the component model, so evolving like the underlying language and features that we're building on, and the like new APIs. I don't know of any like new big additions in the underlying thing. There are known limitations. Like for example, we don't have a notion of borrowing. So instead we explain like, hey, there's a relationship between these two things in the comments, and please make sure this one is not destructed before the other one. Would be great if the type system, because WIT is WASI interface types, it's an actual type system, like had a way to express that as part of the system. Not everyone will agree with me, but I'm like, I'd like that. But so there's some things around that. I don't have any like concretely where I'm like, oh, we're gonna make these in the 0-2 time frame. Hopes and wishes. So yeah.
I've been seeing, in WASI, it's open standard under the umbrella of the WebAssembly community group, and we find consensus before we, advance anything forward. Now, I have been seeing a couple different new worlds and interfaces that folks seem to be kind of settling in on. You get that like sense when there's consensus starting to get reached. I'm feeling that for sure with WASI runtime config.
Oh yeah.
And so, I maybe this year, kind of expecting that one potentially to be kind of added under the umbrella of WASI O2. It'll be built on top of those foundations, and that's additive. It's not part of any of the initial two worlds that we shipped with CLI and WASI HTTP proxy.
Yes.
So I'm excited about that. There's others that are happening, although I haven't like put my finger in the wind. Kind of, or is consensus happening now for those? But that one I think is a good one to keep an eye on.
Definitely, yeah. Like as far as I can tell, like everyone seems to be in broad agreement that it's something we can ship. So perhaps like, well, not 0-1 because that's 2 days from now,
No.
but potentially 0-2 or 0-3. That might be a good timeline for that. Let's see where that will go. Whether the champion believes it's ready to like put forward for a vote in the subgroup.
Something else that you've suggested and put on the meeting notes. So for folks that aren't aware, you can find our upcoming meetings and how they're managed inside the Bytecode Alliance by going to this repo, which I'm totally going to put in the chat and then bring up here. And so I did a little spy through this repo just to highlight things. And I saw that you put in one to discuss open container annotations or labels. I never know if it's annotations or labels, but forgive me there. And potentially to establish a convention around that.
Yeah.
You want to give a little stub for that? I believe that meeting is tomorrow during the component model biweekly.
I forgot about that.
I got you.
Let me double check that first. That would be, yep, my 6 p.m. Great. No, it's in there. Good. Nothing quite like, hey, there's a meeting. The only agenda item is my item. I'm not there. Yeah. But yeah, so by the way, we should like write a post about this. Probably someone should write a post about this, probably for the BA blog. But it's you can take a WebAssembly component now and you can I'm too like type system brain. You can cast it to OCI.
I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah. So the OCI is the open container image format, and there's like 3 specifications. I think we're targeting just 2 of them, and not like WebAssembly is self-contained. You don't need an entire like OS distribution and like file system, all that stuff. So we're not doing any of that. We're just saying like, here's your component. Here's how the metadata should look like to describe what a component is, and store it inside of a registry. And then everyone, all the like, people making the tools to like upload the things can agree on it. The runtimes can agree how to like pull it down. All the other existing OCI tooling gets to learn about components because now it's like, hey, it's a first class thing. So that has been, I guess it's a standard. We have accepted a standard for OCI to extend OCI to know about components. So that's one thing. Now, one of the driving principles behind this, and I don't know if we quite incorporate it as part of the spec, but it was definitely part of the conversation around the spec, is OCI should be round trippable. And that means if you get a component and you cast it to OCI and you cast it back to a component, you should be able to get the same component back out. So it needs to not be lossy. Or if you start with OCI, cast the component back to OCI, you should end up with the same thing. And that means that all of the metadata and all of the information that we put inside of OCI or inside of the OCI manifest or whatever should actually we should be able to get that from the component. And like right now, there's some really useful things you can like put in OCI that we're not, but you can add it by hand. But then the second you like round trip it, you lose it again because we have no place to put it inside of the actual component. And so the annotations for this, they're different. Spec, I think, is the right way to put it, called the open container in format. And it's like some set of like specific like annotations. And the spec manifest is just JSON. So it's like, here's a key called annotations. And then there's a list of key values where it's like open containers dot something dot name. And it's like, oh, it is the name of the thing. Here's the license of the thing, an SPDX like identifier. Here's like, some other like who made this thing, what, like all this metadata. It's really useful to have. So what I'm proposing tomorrow, just to like completely preface this thing, is what if we had a standard way to, in the custom section of a component, to be like, here's a key that we are going to use to define what license this is under. Let's all agree on this key. And then all of the implementers are like, great, yeah, we're going to use this key. And then that becomes like a de facto, like, everyone agrees on it. And that's like, if you have WebAssembly as a format, as a binary format, that you can add new instructions. So we're not going to do that, probably, or I don't think we should do that. Instead, we're going to use the add custom annotation and create a convention for like, here's known keys with known formatting for metadata. And then we get to like round trip it. And then hopefully your packages on GitHub Artifacts or Azure Artifacts, or I forget what they're all called.
I think you're supposed to know that one.
Yeah. GHCR and ACR.
Yeah.
Registry, not, yeah. Anyway, all of those, they know how to like display these open container labels. And so we'll just add them as is, and then they'll like show it nicely. And then we can start adding things, and maybe also like co-evolve like the open container format, because we in WebAssembly land, we have this really useful toolchain thing that every toolchain says like, hey, I helped build this component, my version was this, I added to this. And then you like know like, oh, it went from here to there to there to there to there. And we don't have a way to like represent that in the actual manifest. So it's still part of the component, so you don't actually lose the information. But it would be cool if like suddenly, the tool chain, the provenance of the thing could be part of it. And maybe there's some things there, but I couldn't find it. But I don't know. Maybe there's sort of cross-pollination possible.
I think this is great, and in terms of cross-pollination as well, a lot of that OCI work occurred within the CNCF, and in there's a WASM working group. So if that's a space that you're into, please join them as well. You'll see some of the same faces in both places.
Yes.
And yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. When I cut the OCI versions, I was kind of using some bleeding edge tools, aka I was on branches of things, and didn't have an easy way to pass that in. And so like, even to reference that it was related to the right WASI project, instead of even like the top level WebAssembly org, I had to like go and manually change that. But what that actually did is add an OCI. I still don't know if it's label or annotation, but we're going to roll with it. An OCI label that referenced the right repository. So that's one of those that kind of interested in and seeing if we can establish a convention around it,
Yeah.
and also so that I can say check the tools that I'm using to cut all of these has that, and I don't have to do any
Mhm.
manual steps after the fact. I can write an easy little script that we can
Yes.
run, and yes, very excited about that.
What I really want to see with this is tools like cargo component or componentized pi, like all of these command lines, to be able to look at the language specific metadata manifests, etc. Read those out. In Rust case, what would be cargo toml be like, oh, here's the license in the license key of the cargo toml. Great, that will be the license for this component. Oh, here's a description, here's a version, here's like, just take all of that out and like automatically encode it so that people never need to think about it. And the component that pops out it just works. And now it exists. And now, I think it'll be nice.
Yes, conventions are powerful like that.
Yes.
So cool. Thank you for leading out that work. And yeah, I love to kind of like hint at people like, hey, we have a lot of these other community meetings, and I'm only like giving a sprinkle of things every month, and there's a lot that are worth diving deep on. So the component model bi-weekly usually involves lots of implementers, and that's where we discuss a lot of the aspects like this. The other one that I would recommend people check out is the SIG guest languages meeting, where and a lot of those subgroups where we're talking about probably your favorite language. Any of them that you can think of that are important to you, we should probably have a set there and talking about the implementation for WASI and the component model.
Should you want to add WASI support to your own language and you don't know where to start, like come hang out, come ask questions. Like,
Yes.
That's what we're there for.
Absolutely. So it looks like we're basically at the top of the hour. Is there anything you want to leave folks with? Even if it's top of mind? What are you most excited about with WASI 02 something?
Honestly, I'm fully in work mode. Like, let's get the release done. Let's get the annotations done. Let's get it all in there. Because I'm really excited for people to like start using it. Very excited for the September release of the Rust 181, hopefully.
Yeah.
So that, it'll become available to like Rust stations, like begin targeting WASI 02. And then, standard lib will follow. Hopefully ecosystem will like be able to follow so that, we had WASI 02 release in February, and we knew it would take us probably 6 months for like tooling to catch up. And we're starting to hit that, and we're seeing it where it's like runtimes, tool chains, polish, everything starts like coming into place. I think it's very exciting. So I'm looking forward to that.
Me too. All right. Well, thank you, Yash, for coming and hanging out and having a wonderful chat. I will see you online and everybody else.